So welcome to this session. This is, I believe, my third session here at ACCU on the topic of sustainable development. And I see you nodding, Felix. So I know you keep track of it, and you're probably the one also pushing for it. So I would first like to know who has been in one of my sessions in the past. Felix and Fran. Okay, and I can't really see in the back, but it looks like nobody else. Which means for the two of you, I really want to give the definition at the beginning, but everything else is different because the good thing about sustainable development is that so much is going on, and I keep learning about this like all the time. So it's definitely different, but the definition of what's meant with it is kind of the known stuff for the people who have been here before. Okay, so my name is Jutta Eckstein. Maybe this is what I should have said first. My background is, well, it is software development, but really more so in the Agile world. So I'm very busy in like Agile development and also wrote a couple of books about that. The last book that I wrote actually is the bigger one, the company-wide agility, which I co-wrote with John Buck. And why I'm pointing this out is we figured once a company really says, well, we are agile overall, then this comes with a responsibility. And the responsibility is, for example, this one, if we look at customer focus, it means that if a company says, I'm agile, then it's also expected that the company expects or treats like the surrounding, the ecosystem around the company as a customer as well. So it's looking at economic, ecological, societal, and social environment as a customer as well. And I just want to give you one example. So if a company says it's agile, well, it's even if we can make it smaller. If there's a team saying, we're doing agile stuff and we are really an agile team, and then you figure out that, well, they are not really inclusive, then you might say, perhaps, that's at least our speculation, that's what we see, is that you might say, well, I thought you are agile. Because it kind of comes with that. And the same is true for companies. So this is actually where it started for me to look into sustainability within the context of my profession. And nowadays, I also summarize this one more in the direction of, and you probably will see this later on as well, that we should really understand the planet as a stakeholder as well for whatever products we are developing. So the planet is one of the stakeholders. So this is kind of a more difficult description of it, but the summary of this is the planet. Before I'm going further, I would like to hear from you. What is it that for you connects sustainability and software development? So I'm not focusing on Agile here, but just in software development. And yeah, I think you can raise your hand and Tim will find you. And who would like to share?
Yeah, I can start. So one, I think, important topic is energy consumption. For instance, especially if you look for the current trend of all these so-called AI systems, which burn so much energy, so that it's incredible. So it's beyond what we can imagine, what they already consume. So this is one thing which gets more and more important as these systems are used more and more.
Right, right. There's Fran. See.
I was going to mention the energy consumption as well, but the hardware too. Like, sure we've all got a box of shame somewhere in the house. You're like, why? And there's bits of gold in the cable, and then things like
Yes.
battery technology. I must have so many old lithium batteries in the house, and we're digging that out of the earth. A, it's going to run out at some point, and B, like, what are we
Yes.
doing? Mad.
Right. Right. There's a statement back there.
So I do firmware development, and that means we're usually deploying onto devices. I work on consumer electronics, so it's always a constant thing we think about, which is what's the lifetime of our electronics, and can we support the previous electronics with updates and stuff like that? Because otherwise, people will throw it in the bin, and that just adds to waste.
Right. Yeah. Anyone else? And of course, you don't have to, or maybe it's all set. But yeah, there's another.
I also feel like software has some kind of influence on consumption. Like sustainability has to do with the consumption frenzy we have in the society, and somehow software influence people out of making decision to buy something or not.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Felix once more, and then maybe.
Yeah, I think another important topic is the accessibility to systems as a whole, because, for instance, certain countries perhaps they don't have the money to buy the high-end products of whatever. So there are some kind of inclusivity or exclusivity,
Yes.
not on purpose, just by not able to buy something, and this is
Right.
something to be considered
Right.
too.
Right. So very, very good, all what we heard. I'm not sure if it has been stressed yet that software development can also help with sustainability. It can also make the world better. And this is also something we have to keep in mind. However, it can come with a threat. And the threat is like the energy emission we've heard the e-waste was the other thing. We had like 2 people at least talking about that. And then the third big threat is exactly what you're saying. It's called the digital divide, which is the accessibility to technology, really. So that can also make a huge difference. Yeah, exactly. I wanna, well, no, I thought I want to do this, but I can't. Why not? What's wrong? Okay, let's try this. Okay, I want to show my typical agenda, where I first want to look at the what are the facts, then some insights, and then finally, what is it that we can all do, which is us, right? And so if we are starting with the facts, then I want first point out the point about the energy consumption that has been also raised by quite some of you. And there are various forecasts out there. So the person that does the most in that field, and I have to find it. So it's Anders Andrei. So he's really kind of the key figure there, and has written quite some reports, researches on that topic, and keeps updating his findings as well. And this one just shows like various forecasts about the energy consumption of IT in the years till 2030. What he also learned was when he first started his first research, and I believe that was his PhD, and that's a few years back. There, it was even worse than it is now. So this is a good thing. So it has changed for the better a little bit. However, what it still says, in the worst case, it could mean that IT needs about 21% of the overall energy consumption by 2030. And well, that's quite a number, I would say. Okay, now I promised already that I want to give a definition what we are talking about when we talk about sustainability, and there are various definitions out there which might make it a bit harder, but this is why I think it's important so you know what definition is it I'm working with. So first of all, there's the very first definition that has been provided by the United Nations from the Brundtland report, and which was headed by Ms. Brundtland, and so this is why it had that name. And basically it says, whatever we do, we shouldn't do it at the cost of future generations, right? So we can live our lives and do whatever, and the question is, of course, are we doing this or not? And so this is one definition which I think is super helpful, and it's like a general theme maybe that can go with us or accompany us. And then there is another definition which is way more fine-grained, also given by the United Nations, and these are the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. I can imagine that some of you have seen that, especially in our part of the world. They're often shown in various occasions, or there are like posters placed and at different places and so on. So what they do is they look at various areas and say like, okay, sustainability means in this area, this and that. So it, for example, oh, this is nice. I have never pointed this out, but now this jumps into my eye. Number 7 says affordable and clean energy. I like the affordable as well. Then it also goes into more social aspects, like if I see number 4, it says quality education, which also speaks about or addresses the digital divide that you brought up, for example. That could be something. The first 2 go for me a little bit together, like no poverty and zero hunger. Then maybe a last one I'm pointing out here because I'm a passionate scuba diver. Life below water is one of the things that I like. So these are very specific definitions of different areas. And I think this is really important because also companies are asked to report what they are doing in terms of these different sustainable development goals. However, I also find them hard for me to work with in my profession. And this is what I want to do. I want to, we talk about sustainable software development basically here. And so I'm not sure if the product I'm working with, I can pay into zero hunger, for example, or whatever. And so there is another definition which basically takes all those 17 sustainable development goals and puts them into various buckets, exactly 3. And then it has more, well, let's say it's kind of a Goldilocks approach, because this is very broad, this is very detailed, and the one with the 3 buckets sits kind of in the middle, and this is the one I prefer and go with. It comes also with various names, but it's one of the names is 3-pillar model. And it has, as I said, like 3 buckets, and the one bucket or pillar is the social one, or the one focusing on people. And it says like it's about aiming, equity, health, and livability. And I want to do a translation right away here to what it might mean in our world, like software development. So it talks about diversity, safety, security, privacy, accessibility as well. So these are all things that are important for us when we develop software, right? The second pillar is the one that often comes to mind first. It is the environment. So it's about that we need to protect the planet. And so we look at carbon reduction, so reducing the carbon footprint. We also talk about green software, green IT, and all of these things. They typically focus only on energy efficiency. And then the third one is about economics, or prosperity is the other way how it's related to. And I really would like you that it sinks in what it stands for. It stands for improving the lives and prospects of everyone, everywhere, which is a huge aim. And I will come back to this later. And here we are speaking about sustainable economies, but also responsible products. So this is the definition that works for me. And it's called three-pillar model. It also is called triple bottom line. That's another thing because it's also used, not because, but it's also used for accounting, for example. They use the same thing here when they do their sustainability reports. And the third name is people, planet, prosperity. So just in case you find something somewhere else and they're saying, what kind of stupid stuff did you tell me? And well, now you know it really comes with various names. And it's not something I came up with, right? So it's just out there. Maybe let me check quickly. Are there any questions, or are you fine with this, that we go with that definition? I see some people nodding. Okay, thank you. So this is about the facts and kind of the setting here. I want to go to the insights. And with the insights, I just want to use the same definition. And as you can see, I also brought an example here. So what I want to do now is bringing or sharing some examples that I see or found in IT, and there are really many, that show how we do not address these topics. And sorry to say we, because you might not be part of any of those. So the first example that I'm having is about social, and it's something I only discovered, I think, by the end of last year, that this is the case, that the body scanners actually ask that first is a button push that says, here comes somebody who is male or somebody who is female, and it has the classic blue and red thing. And this might sound not so difficult, but if you, well, I kind of recommend, and on the other hand, I don't recommend, but yeah, let me recommend this. Do a search at one point for the body scanners asking for binary decision who is coming, because you really read about horror stories for transgender people or non-binary people, and it's really terrible how they are treated. And just by, well, a software decision. So from a software point of view, we don't need that. So we could still have that scanner, right? And of course, I'm also 100% sure that whoever developed that, whichever teams, and I guess there are many because it seems all the body scanners are asking for that, and I guess there are more companies than one providing those. But probably someone said it's a requirement that we need to know. And it's not that the software team came up with the idea, let's do that. I don't really think so. But we could bring this to the attention of people, and definitely it makes the life of people harder, of some people. Let me go on with the environment. Oh, I have a more generic example here, which is, well, last year we broke the record in IT and we overtook the aviation industry. So we have a higher carbon footprint now than aviation in IT. And, well, that's kind of weird. Sometimes I think people ask a lot about, oh, are you still flying? I've never heard somebody asking me, are you still using a computer actually? Ooh, or a phone or whatever. Yeah, so there's something going on, and think of this research that I showed by Anders Andrei, who says like how the curve is going up. And this is just like one of the things where we see it's really going up right now. And it might not end up at the worst case with the 21%, but we are making progress that's not so good. Okay, the third one was economics, and you remember it was about improving the lives and prospects of everyone everywhere. And here is an example. I'll let you read this maybe. And again, this is software. So Frances Hogan, I guess you all kind of heard about that when she is this a verb as well? Whistleblowed? Can you say that? I just made that up, maybe. About what's going on in Meta, so Facebook, Instagram, and so on, and that it really does not improve the lives and prospects of people everywhere, right? And it's algorithms, it's software that's doing it. It's not anything else. And yes, I can imagine or hope that you are not working in this environment, and so for you it looks different, but there are examples almost everywhere where we find that we are not as good as we could be. And that's also why I want to talk about this. So let me quickly ask you, so now based on how you saw the connection between sustainability and software development, and now also what you heard, so why do you think is sustainable software development important? And yeah, okay, you can easily say, well, we should consume less energy, but maybe there are more difficult answers. There's Tim and Giovanni would like to, yeah.
Yeah, I think the social aspects are actually quite important because
Yeah.
the world runs on software. Yeah, so we need to use it for everyday lives. So, for example, something I see is accessibility is really a big issue. So I noticed this with my parents.
Yeah.
They are 80 something. They need to do things with the bank, with the paying bills, and it's utterly confusing.
Right.
Yeah, so this is a problem.
Yeah.
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 Or accessibility also for people in general. Not everybody has a computer at home.
Yeah.
Or not everybody is able to actually use it properly, and they have difficulties. You know, even when we talk about removing cash and making it electronic.
Yes.
That will cause all sorts of problems. Yeah, how can I give, I don't know, charity money to someone that is sleeping on the street? Because there will still be those people, for example, yeah, or paying. So there are lots of these aspects that to me are quite important and we are not addressing yet.
Actually, for the last point you made, I saw this resolved, I believe it was even before the pandemic when I've been in China. Even the very old woman in the street selling her 3 apples that she's having, she's taking the money via her phone, not taking cash. So it seems in some countries, this is definitely not in my country. Germany is always way behind with stuff like that. And maybe also we just like cash. We like that. I don't know. But yeah, I'm really happy that you're pointing this out, because all too often I feel sustainability turns into a discussion about energy efficiency only, and the social aspect, accessibility, well, you pointed it out before as well, is really important. Yeah. Yes. Isn't it all? Yeah.
Hi. Do you think maybe an issue within software development, because it's a virtual activity and not a physical activity, we don't really think of cost very much in, iterations and using things.
Yes.
And one of the great strengths is it's almost costless, or it feels costless to iterate.
Yeah.
Where you don't iterate if you're making steel drums, well, because it's very expensive. So maybe there's a sort of subconscious view that we don't have to sort of be precious about things. I don't know if that's the right term.
Right, right. Well, actually, sometimes I think it's also the vocabulary we are using, like the cloud. And it's like, it's nowhere. It feels like it's very soft and light. It doesn't do any harm. And of course, it also comes with a carbon footprint and so on. It's heavy. Anyone else? Why do you think it's important, sustainable software development? There is Felix in front.
Yeah, one thing with that, Rose already said, I want to extend it a bit. So more and more parts of our life is driven or is driven by the mobile phones and so on.
Right.
And there will become with higher risk, for instance, safety, so compromising of privacy data in these things, and I think nearly every week or every second week some breakage is there, and I don't know how many million users privacy data is exposed, and people are threatened, potentially threatened by this, and I think this is a problem that is getting worse and worse. At the moment, I don't see that it's going better.
Very true. Anyone else? I think no. What did I find? Ooh, I thought, okay. Well, the easy one was protecting the environment, of course. Then what we haven't talked about is also about finding new markets, maybe new clients. And this is perhaps my hope, or maybe it's even my belief, that I think more and more people will think it's important that the products that they are buying take sustainability into account, and not only by lip service, but really. So same thing about getting and keeping talent. So if we look at the younger generations, for them this is way more important. And if you have an argument for, well, what we are doing is really taking sustainability seriously, you might have an easier way of really getting good talent. And then what we haven't discussed yet is also saving cost. So because it's more energy efficient, the bill will be smaller. Okay, so we have quite some stuff that we could do, or why we think it's important. So what is it what we are doing? And I want to start with something, and I believe it's really the only thing that's maybe leaning too much into the agile world, but I hope you bear with me. And it is what we can do in terms of stories. And actually, I don't even care if you call them stories, if you write them this way, if you call them requirements or needs or wishes from the client, it doesn't matter. And you can write them up in a completely different form. I just use this format, which is often used in the agile world, and I'm not the one who actually likes it, which comes on top of it. And it's completely unimportant, that form. However, what it says basically for any requirement, who needs it, what is needed, and why. So this is kind of the summary of it. And if you just stay with that, that's like one thing. However, what we should start discussing about now when we talk about requirements, wishes, needs, stories, that we should also talk about what's the impact on sustainability of that requirement, story, need, wish. And once we start discussing that, maybe we learn something that could mean, like when we talk about costs, if there's a requirement where we figure out, oh, this is really expensive, and we go back to our client and say, this will be expensive, are you aware of that? And then they might say, oh, then maybe I don't want it. Or maybe they still need it because it's super important. And the same thing is here. Maybe we come back and say, pooh, this will really change the carbon footprint for much worse than the system is right now. And we don't see any other way. So maybe this is also a different way of coming to a conversation with our clients about making our systems more sustainable. I have an example which is not necessarily good, but still it's an example. So it could say, as a designer, I want to reduce the amount of font types so the page performance will increase for users and pages will be more digestible. With the impact of reduced carbon emissions because of less data transfer. And just, it's really not about the form. I don't care about the form. You can write this up completely differently or not writing it up. The thing for me, what's important is that we should start having a discussion on sustainability, on the impact on sustainability whenever we look at requirements. So this is for me the thing. And now, just because I mentioned font types here, I want to do a little excursion to font types because you might think, oh, fonts, that's really nothing. So there is this professor in Poland, Łukasz Jetraszczak, I believe, I'm not sure. My Polish is not existent. And he built a little website where he just tried to experiment with different font types. And what you can see here, there's quite a difference between Google fonts on the one extreme and system fonts on the other extreme. And in the middle, kind of the self-hosted fonts. And so it's probably still not a lot. Well, he added it up like carbon emissions over a year. So then it's getting a little bit bigger, but is it still important? We don't know. However, there are over 1 billion websites out there and they keep growing, and then maybe it does make a difference what kind of font types are used. So that's just my little excursion here. Now, looking at other stuff, so that was the first thing that I think we can do. We can start having a discussion whenever requirements are stated. Another thing that we can start looking at is at the whole infrastructure. So what is it that we need? What do we really need? And we should probably refrain from the thing that I believe, we got used to over the last years, that we always want to have the maximum. We always want to have a really big thing. So for sure it will run and it will run fine and whatever. And it doesn't really matter if it's dev, prod, or test. So for all the infrastructure, we often ask for the biggest possibility. Maybe this is a good thing that we now start asking for something smaller and really consider what is it that we really need? What's the availability of it? Maybe can we share the infrastructure with some other projects, maybe other companies even. Sorry. And this way start to cutting down. And as you can see with cutting down here, it's already cost saving if we do that. So that's also helpful, and you have even a good argument to get the support from your company. What else do we want to look at? This is one of my favorites. Personas. I'm not sure who is using personas. Is this a known concept here? I see a few, not too many. So personas, or the idea of personas is that when we develop a product, that we first think, who is our target user? And then we ensure that whatever we are doing is really aimed for the target user. And the thing is, often if we are not doing this, then we try to fulfill the needs of everyone by not fulfilling any needs in the end. So because we try too much, and so it's not helping anyone. And that's the whole idea. And of course also to to limit our resources, if you will. That could be also a thing. Now, one of the things, speaking of accessibility also, so who can access the system, what I do nowadays is that I often say, okay, personas is still good because we don't want to really make it so broad that it's not usable anymore. It's kind of actually what I just get reminded. If you're not thinking about your target users, then often it's kind of like these frameworks which are not helping anyone because they are too generic, right? So what I nowadays always do is say from time to time, let's take a look. But how would the system behave if the absolute opposite of the target audience we have in mind would try to use the system? In order to find out, are we completely excluding people here? Or is it still possible to be used? Maybe not as good as for the one group that we really have in mind, but still we kind of should think about others. So this is the one thing that I wanted to point out about personas. The other thing that I want to point out is what says here about persona spectrum. And this has, at least, this came to my attention by a colleague of mine, or friend, David Dame, who works for Microsoft, and they came up with that persona spectrum card that helps them, and hopefully now you, to make the system more accessible. And what they came up with is the idea that very often when we talk about accessibility, we only have the permanent, let's say, incapabilities in mind. However, there are also temporary ones or situational ones. And I just want to go through that, like with one example, in order to bring that point hopefully across. So when we talk about making a system accessible, then often, as I said, we have the permanent in mind, which means for hearing, it's people who are deaf. So if we have them in mind, then probably we think differently about our system that might need voice control or something, right? Because that's hard to do, but they can't operate it if they are deaf. But now there are also temporary people who have a problem operating a system with voice because they might have an ear infection. So because of that, their hearing isn't good right now. And then we have the situational one where there's this funny bartender. So you are in a noisy environment, and therefore it will be hard for you to operate a system with voice control. And so what it actually says, that persona spectrum, or what it does, at least for me, is understanding that if we make the system more accessible, then it helps everyone. It's not only, not that this is kind of first, but sometimes you think, oh, this is only a small group and is it whatever important, and so on. I don't know. I hope we don't have that discussion, but who knows what's going on in the back of our minds. So if we only think about the permanent one, the deaf, blind, whatever people, then that group might be small. But if we consider that also temporary and situational things can be different, then really we have way more inclusivity here, and therefore the system will be much better accessible for everyone. It will be helpful really for everyone. So keeping that in mind, so I kind of like that. Okay. We are coming to one of my favorites. Oh, maybe they're all favorites. Did I say that for that as well? I think so. Supporting older hardware. I think, yeah, the two of you, you were talking about, well, all the gold and whatever is in the systems, and we keep buying new hardware and all of that. So I want to talk about this a little bit. So, no. Before I talk about this, I want to bring some data. I know we have talked about facts already, but still. Let me take a look at that. Who has seen the Wee Man? Heard of it? That's a sculpture, well, as it says, created by Paul Bonomini in the UK. And what it does is it shows, well, it's a sculpture built of all the e-waste created by one British person over the lifetime. And of course, also for the Germans, right? It's the same, whatever. And so here you get some statistics about that. So, like, we have one average UK citizen, for example, uses 160 mobile phones. And if I read that, that sounds even not so much right now, right? And you can calculate this all up. For example, the e-waste created, if you scale it up and we look at the EU population, then the e-waste would be 590 times the Tower Bridge. This is what we are creating. And I'm saying this because it's very often software that's pushing us to buy new hardware. And if I just think of phones, very often we buy a new phone because the OS doesn't run anymore, or the apps don't run properly anymore, or we can't install them all together. And similarly, it's true for our clients, so that we often expect our clients to have the latest hardware, a good connectivity, whatever big monitor, and whatever else. So we are often with the software also pushing them to new hardware or pushing them to create e-waste, if you will. And that's why I first started with my other favorite topic, supporting older hardware. So for supporting older hardware, there are actually two things that are kind of known, that are concepts that are, I bet, known by you, which is on the one hand, well, here I call them sustainability toggles, but if you have feature toggles in mind, you know what I'm talking about, I guess. And I want to detail this as well. Also, responsive design, where we look at what kind of client is there. And now, how can this look? Some of you might have seen this graph before, so this is not by me, so it has been published on Martin Fowler's website, and it looks at toggles from two different angles. On the one hand, how long, for how much time do we need the toggle, and how dynamic does it need to be? And just to give you some examples, like release toggles, that's a typical thing that we use if a feature didn't make it to the new release, and therefore we put a toggle in and say, well, we don't want our users to run into that feature because it's not ready implemented yet. It's not finalized yet. So, and this means most often so that feature is deactivated. That's the result of it, making a release toggle here. Most often it's not around for long because with our next deployment, that feature should be finished. That's at least the hope. And then it's also not super dynamic. It's really more, well, when we deploy, then it's the time where we say, okay, these features, they don't work. Looking at a bit more dynamic aspect, the experiment toggles, they are looking at stuff like A/B tests. So very dynamic because we actually want to know, do people prefer feature A or feature B? What is it where we want to go? So it really switches there. It's often a bit longer sitting around than release toggles, but not super long, but more like weeks, perhaps months, in order till we learn enough so we know which features we will implement. Then I don't want to go through all of them, but let me go to the one at the upper right corner, permission toggles. Permission toggles are super well known. It's I log into the system, and based on my credential, I'm allowed to use feature X, but not Y. Right? So this is a classic that we are using all over the place. And in this area is where the sustainability toggles fall into. Why? Because also they are around more or less forever, like permission toggles. It's not that we have them only for a few weeks, months, or whatever. So we always want to know, well, if my credentials are like that, then Jutta shouldn't do this. She can't. And it's kind of dynamic because it always looks at the features that are there and am I allowed to use that or not? And it's the same way is it with sustainability toggles where it's very dynamic because it looks into what kind of client I'm using and does this client, remember we are speaking of supporting older hardware, does this client support that feature or not? If it's not supported, it's not available for me. And if it is, I can use it, of course. And it's hopefully, those toggles are hopefully around for a long time because for the time we are supporting that old hardware, that old client, for example. So this is another thing that we can do. What else? Oh, yeah. I want to give you some information about what you can nowadays find out. So there's also stuff that's happening here where we keep learning for where we can find more information. For example, there is the electricity map, and you can of course use the QR code, but it's more like for you to know this is how you can go there. But I put also the bit.ly, and if you look for electricity map, you will find that. So this shows what kind of energy is available where, when. So you can look at different countries, at different daytimes or weekdays or night times, and there you can find out what kind of energy is consumed, but you can also look at what is produced. And then, of course, the greener, the better, the darker, the worse. And this is knowledge that can help you for creating more energy-aware operations. And what I mean with this is, for example, the following. So when we understand when low carbon electricity is available and the energy mix is renewable, then what we can do is actually decide that the operations that can run asynchronously, that they are run exactly at those times and not at the times where the fossil fuel is used. So if the more we know about stuff like the energy mix, the better we can do stuff like that. And let me give you an example, and perhaps some of you are old enough that you have seen that too. So when I was raised, my mom told me, well, for the energy intense machines like laundry machines or whatever, we run them, for example, on the weekend or by night, because then energy is much cheaper than during the day when the industry wants all the energy. I see some of you nodding, so some of you have been raised like that. I know it's kind of some time ago, but still. Now the things are different. On the one hand, when the energy is renewable, it's typically also cheaper. Not all the countries are passing that on to the clients. I see in the UK not, I see that. But hopefully it will. Let's be optimistic. This will happen. But still, it's good for the environment. And so nowadays it's better to look at when is the energy mix renewable and run these heavy or energy intense machines during the day, because there it's more likely that the energy mix is renewable and you're not relying on fossil energy. And so this is the same now with these asynchronous tasks, especially if they are, of course, if they don't need a lot of energy, then it doesn't really matter, but some of them do because they are heavy algorithms. And so you can then schedule them at these times, what you have learned from the energy mix. Another thing which is related to the topic about what kind of energy is available is that we now can also look at the cloud we are using from energy perspective. So Google, for example, has now that region picker. And the thing what we typically have used for deciding on a cloud, pro or con, is the price price and the latency. But now we can also look at the carbon footprint. And the region picker says, how important is that for me? And then it spits out, well, then go with your cloud here or there. Pick this or that. So this is stuff that's already available. And of course, it's not only Google who does that. And there's the link for the region picker, but you can also just search for the region picker, then you find it. Also, AWS and Azure are offering stuff like that. So far, unfortunately, I haven't seen that they do it like this user-friendly, that I just have like a visual thing. They have more like guidance that they're offering what you can do for making your cloud more sustainable. But still, everyone is kind of offering something here. So this is good. I think there's stuff going on, and we are making progress. I believe I have maybe 2 more things from my side what you can do. And we are now going even more into coding for the 2 last things. So the one is build less. Because everything that we build needs energy. And all too often we have stuff sitting around we don't even know anymore about. And it's maintained and it's tested and all of that. So, well, focusing on value, or basically how it's called, no feature creep. So we should really look into what are the features that are really needed already and question that if they're really needed or if it maybe can be resolved in a different way. And the second thing, and that's maybe a new way of thinking, monitor if the features are really used. And if they are not used, be courageous enough and eliminate them, delete them. And yeah, it's requiring a different kind of monitoring system or different kind of tests even, where we learn about this, if features are used or not, and then getting rid of them. And the other thing I wanted to share is, well, if you talk about quality, technical depths, and all of that, then of course, the more technical depths we are having, the more we are also taking with us. And again, this costs energy, and actually it also makes it hard for us to build new features, which is also a bit annoying. So we are also slowed down by that. And well, maybe this really speaks to that. So if we have future generations in mind with what we are building, and if we are really refactoring our stuff, then the future generation, and to be honest, at the time I was a software developer, very often I felt I'm my future generation because I wasn't able to build in a new feature based on what I have done 2 months before, because I didn't understand it anymore. And it was, I don't know, I didn't clean up. And this is happening, I think. Well, sometimes just because we overlook stuff. And so future generations can mean it's helpful for ourselves, but it's definitely helpful for the whole system that it's more maintainable. So this is kind of the stuff that I wanted to offer as concrete things to do. I want to share one more thing, which is what I've co-developed with 2 colleagues, which is a survey. The people who have been in my sessions last year, I have used the survey as well, but now I have picked different statements, so it might be new to you. And I would like to ask you to take that survey, and we will look at the results together. So it's a few statements that will tell kind of where are we right now? What is our discussion or state around software development in terms of sustainability? And of course, you would need a little bit of time to answer these, and then we look at the results together. And I keep watching how the results are dribbling in, and then we will look at those. Yes, good. Okay. So, first of all, for in terms of understanding it, if we look, for example, at the social thing, it says here 3.43, and it is the best of that because the outer circle, so the one around here, that would be a 5, and the 5 would be the thing when you would have answered true. Right? There was the true, false, and the things in between, kind of, right? So if it really expands out, this is like, okay, we are doing this, and we are there, very sustainable what we are doing. So what we see just from the outside already is that again, the social part, that's kind of good. It's over 3, way over 3 actually. Economic is barely 3, 2.9, and we have the environmental as the lowest with 2.3. Let's first look, I would suggest that's the thing that's good, right? Okay, and then we also look here at what's good. What's really good is preventing bad actors from accessing or using any stored user data. I guess we all have learned enough about that, and it had been in the news all too often, so that hopefully we all learned our lessons to really watch out for that. We don't want to be in the news, right? So this is not completely a surprise, I think, that this is really high up here. Let's look at the thing that's really here, also shown at the opposite, the one that's just a 2. That's the accessibility part. Okay, so the one that some of you had been pointing out throughout the session, yeah, maybe we can do better there. And I believe it has just started the discussion around that. So, and if you think about data security, safety, privacy, that whole discussion has started probably 10 years ago. And this is why we are where we are. Now with accessibility, I think we are only talking more seriously about that for perhaps 3 years or so. So probably it takes a bit more time till we really learn it. Or we still think it's not worth it, not to enough people. And then think about the persona spectrum. I would like to take at that. Oh, this is interesting as well. Oh, and you're doing great. 3.4, that's already kind of great, I think. Users have the option to choose what data they share with us. So it's 3.4. This is already really, I think, strong. I don't see this always that strong. So congratulations. Any questions around the social part right now before I move on to the next one there in the back? Yes.
I was curious about the accessibility. I think if you have a team that's quite diverse, you have different perspectives, you can account for all of that. If you don't have a team that has all those thoughts or those perspectives included, do you have any strategies you can recommend to help us know how to include more thought?
I completely agree. So I think the easiest for all of us is to have a really diverse team that will help us to make the products we are making as inclusive as possible. So, okay, so this is on you because you have seen this last year, and of course you remember that, I'm sure. So often I use an example which shows that a person wasn't able to create an account because her last name had 2 characters and the system expected at least 3. And if we would have on that team more people who are from all parts of the world, that wouldn't have happened. And for a lot of these things, actually, it's also my optimistic thinking. I don't think that any software teams says, well, we want to exclude those people. It's just, it doesn't occur to us. And therefore, diversity and bringing various perspectives together helps really a lot. And it's also obvious that we probably cannot bring all the diversity in the team. that we need. And this is, again, where for me personas can come in, where we can start looking at the personas from a different, diverse background than we are. And this is a really great point. Actually, I once said, related to Conway's law, that I see that organizations build products that resemble the organization's bias. Because with the bias, we are hiring people from a kind of a homogeneous group, and then we also shouldn't wonder that maybe the products also turn out like that, and we haven't thinking about others. So, yeah, very good point. You have another comment to that?
I just have a follow-up question. I guess I'm curious if you think there are any caveats to consider if we're trying to create personas for people that we don't identify with, or we can't fully understand their experience and we're trying to create a persona for them. Could that also lead us to pitfalls?
Right. Yeah, that's exactly the way we should go. Yes, thank you. Any other questions around the social part and maybe also your experience by answering these or stuff that was triggered there?
Yeah, so this is actually, I was just going to give some comments about the fact that the social score is so high. I think a lot of us are targeting people specifically, so we're thinking a lot about them. And specifically for the accessibility, I was thinking about my own prior experiences for the products that I've worked to build, like watches and smartwatches and headphones.
Yes.
And I was thinking like, well, we don't design headphones for deaf people. We're not really building a hearing aid. We're just building something for people to listen to music and other things like that. So when I saw that part, I was like, yeah, I know we explicitly only target specific people. We can be more inclusive, and I think we do try to build more inclusive products, but sometimes you just can't always hit everyone.
Yeah, yeah, very much so. Okay, let's look at another pillar. Which one? I guess we definitely need to look at environmental. 2.32. This is where we are sitting here. And we have one that's kind of, well, at least over 3, so kind of in the middle. The team monitors the hardware utilization of the product both in use as well as while idle. That's already also strong, that if you are doing this, I don't see this too much that this is done, but it's a good start because it tells us also, or can tell us quite some stuff around energy efficiency. Maybe we need to look at more. I didn't remember that I put so many stuff around environmental in here. See, the product works also for people using older devices. Oh, very good. So I was talking to you and you did all that. Okay, there's a statement around that.
Yeah, so this is a problem that we actually have to cope with. So we're doing music devices, and there's a problem that older hardware, so older hardware is for us older than 10 years. And
which is old.
Yes, but they are still out there, and at a certain point we have, or there's the decision that we want to get, let's say, rid of the old code, so some kind of maintaining and to reduce the cost of maintaining older code, which is just used by very small group that remaining. So
right.
this is there's a difficult balance to find. Is it worth maintaining this code? It must be compiled for every build step and
right.
And so on, and watched by us, so it costs us time
yes.
to see for this. And do you know if there is some kind of guidance or measurement how that could us help to support this kind of decisions? Because at the moment these are decisions more or less by the stomach. So
yeah.
I think after 10 years, yes, we know we can start cutting off the support
Yeah.
for this kind of old generation, and we just support the new one so that we can get rid of this old code.
So a measurement or guidance for that balance. Actually, I don't have an answer for that. I have a different story, and you might have even heard about that. So with my phone story. So I do have a Fairphone, and a Fairphone tries to really support their phones as long as possible next to whatever else they are doing. So they try quite some stuff. My phone, I had to really put it into e-waste. Well, not really. I could send it back, and they said they will recycle it. Not sure if this is true, but I just try to believe it. It was short 1 month from 7 years. And I really hoped to have 7 years with my phone, but we didn't last that last month. When I had it 5 years, the company, so Fairphone, said, well, we really, really can't, so that's the balance, can't support Android anymore because the chips have changed so much, and we can't put the latest system with all the security in mind. This is typically the biggest problem, right? We can't maintain it anymore. So there I thought, oh my God, this is it. But then in this case, the community took over. So the community took over and said, well, we will do that. And so they maintained it for another 2 years and provided new OS systems. So not sure if you can rely on something like that, but this is at least one thing that I have seen happening. Another thing that also Fairphone does is that they have built their hardware very much component-based. And so if something isn't working anymore, you can exchange the one component for another. And I'm really not like a hardware expert or anything, but for my phone, the mic broke, and I just ordered a new microphone, and it's really plug and play. So I plugged it in, and it worked. So that's another thing. So maybe you could also exchange parts of the hardware if you have control over it, which is true for Fairphone because it's their product. So that's another question that I don't know, right? So the thing is, well, and I have a third one, right? That was the thing where I said, well, after this almost 7 years, I could send it back. And they said, well, they think of circular development. They're not that far yet. Circular would mean they're taking it completely apart and creating a new phone out of the old one. So with the parts that they are having, like, well, you mentioned all the whatever gold and cobalt and whatever else sits in there and so on. They are not that far yet, but this is another thing that can be thought of, like taking the hardware back and trying to recycle it and providing a new one. So these are the 3 things that I think of, which doesn't answer your question about is there a measurement for the balance? I don't know. It's more that I can think you can do other stuff. If you can, again, it depends on what's in your control. Okay. So we only looked at the one thing here, and that was that discussion. Very good. Yes, sure.
So back to my main thing, which is consumer products. I think I probably voted put a pretty low score for this particular area, mostly because I think I've had conversations with my coworkers. We have to kind of just do our work, but when we think about making all our products and the fact that we have these, cycles of every 2 to 3 years producing a new product, and we understand.
And that's hardware or that's software?
Oh, that's in the hardware level, but we also, and I know this is not a talk, mostly on the software aspect, but I guess the thing that I'm kind of coming to is usually after we have, because of that hardware flow, the cycle that we have, it also means that we don't dedicate any additional resources for programming or like building up new software and features for the old stuff.
Yeah.
So it really does push people. I know we've said this before, but really does push people to want to or need to upgrade, which is not good for the environment.
Yeah, yeah. Well, when you say upgrade, there comes a whole different point with it as well. So it could. I'm not sure if this question was there. Like, can I define as a client, as a user, when comes the next upgrade? Can I define the frequency? Is it decoupled from the hardware upgrade? So this opens up another whole thing. But yeah. Okay, trying to take a look at one of the others here. And which one we use? The older devices. We look for the smallest, 1.5. Oh, I like that. The product informs users before automatically launching a running task in the background that may not be used. Okay, it's 1.5, and I'm not sure if some of you, well, we could also look into that, but I'm not doing this right now. If some of you just said, well, I don't know, or anything, so you could also look at the survey from this point of view, how many really agreed with the same value, and is it really an average or so? Yeah, I think it's a typical thing. We just do stuff, and we don't have in mind, for example, what kind of system, connectivity, bandwidth, whatever our client has right now. And perhaps there's a problem, and this is quite right now not a good time. And actually there's a lot of software that does stuff I don't know. I just like one example for me, well, my laptop is really I think it's old. So it's more than 5 years, which I think is kind of old for a laptop. When I start Miro, I don't know what that machine is doing. Well, I don't know what Miro does, but it's kind of, there's hardly anything else possible. And, well, maybe we could do better, and maybe it doesn't need to do all that. That's also, yeah. Isn't that an idea that we can provide information how to use the product in a more resource efficient manner? I guess that value is so low because it's something, it doesn't occur to us. But maybe now you think about it. Yes, it's good. The mic is there.
Yeah, and this is one that I personally voted really high on because since we work on electronics, they won't last very long during the day if you don't consider telling the user, hey, you may want to, either do always on display, or you may want to select the option to disable the display after a certain amount of time, or use gestures and that kind of thing, which every one of these things accounts for this. I would say that the energy consumption concern, I voted like relatively high because it's such a critical aspect of all the products that we build.
Yes.
I could totally imagine that for everywhere else, you're like, wait, why do I care? Like, I'm just writing some software. It's not going to make that much of an effect.
Right. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I think we can learn a lot from that. Should we look into one more? Maybe one higher up? What is that? We had that, of course. What else? What about this? Yeah, only using these hardware capacities for the features that are actually used right now, which is a little bit similar to like starting stuff in the background and then it might not be used at all. Let's take a quick look at the economic. And here we have, what do we have? Oh yeah, that's, I would hope that this is really true for almost all of us, that the team responds promptly when security gaps become known. Again, this goes together with security, something we have learned our lessons here. Let's go for the lowest one, which is 213. That was the feature creep thing, right? Which features are really used? Do we know that? Often we don't. We don't look. Yes?
So I think this is comes in conflict with something else from the other group. So how much information do we track from the user? So we have, for instance, for our products, we have a system in place when the user opts in.
Right.
So then we really track which feature and everything is used, and everybody in the company can look. So these are the features of the product that are heavily used, or that's just so that you can make huge kind of queries on this.
Right.
So. But on the other side, you have the conflict. So this is some kind of data tracking. This is nothing personal, but it's still data tracking that you're using. You see when the user uses it during the day, during the night, or whatever. So this is some kind of compromise that one has to do there.
Yeah. Actually, what you found out here is that quite some of them, they are contradicting. Well, also actually the thing that you said before about the balance, because if you support the old hardware, then you might have software in many different versions in place, which also sit around and use time, energy, and everything. You know, it could be also contradicting to the feature creep and to keep like a small footprint, memory footprint, and all of that. And the same is true with that. So, well, it probably depends very much on the system. So for quite some systems, I believe you can just track are features used or not. And it doesn't have to be any privacy related thing. But for other systems, you cannot separate it out. And then it always has that conflict. So very true. And yeah, so really some of these are really contradicting each other. However, and maybe I really need to say this now, for me, what that survey does, on the one hand, it gives us a foundation to start a discussion around that topic. Then it also makes that topic approachable, because very often if we think about, let's make it really big, protecting the planet or making the world a better place, this is big. Next is world peace, of course, with software, right? So it's hard to know where do we start. And the survey is kind of something where I realize for the teams, it helps them to get started, because they see, oh, this is really, we're scoring low there, and maybe there's something in here that we can make a difference with. Or maybe we find out that's not fitting to our context. Maybe next time we are not even answering that statement, or we are ignoring it altogether or something like that. But for me, it feels like it gives us a lever to get started. All right, and the other thing is, it's not necessarily giving us the answer. Well, it does not give us any answer. But I really hope it helps us to start asking better questions. That's my big hope with this survey. And I see they're applauding. We would have 10 more minutes, and maybe we can look at least one more. So I don't know which one. That's again security. That was the frequency of updates, the thing we have talked about. So maybe that is really kind of it right now. And we have now gone over all of those. Okay, let me, oops, no. This is not what I wanted. See, if I don't know what I want, then it's really difficult. So this is where we had been. And I think if we want to create, so this is kind of my summary here, if we want to create sustainable systems, or if we want to develop software in a sustainable way, what I really think what we need is we should remember all those principles and practices that we have known once. And some of us are old enough that they still have that back there. Because in the past, connectivity was low, memory was small, and so there was all that. We were able to create systems, but now we are so used to always ask for the biggest system, the biggest memory, the highest bandwidths, and all of that. And maybe we should start not pushing always the limits, but really making stuff smaller. So this is remembering how we were able to deal with all that. And these are all principles, heuristics, and so on that are still around. And maybe we just need to memorize those. And then, well, I think it also provides a market advantage. Remember, we might find a different market. We might have it easier time to find and keep talent. So this is another thing, and perhaps it's more cost effective. That's another point. And with that, I want to close with, I have tons of links here, and let me see what I really want to point out. So, well, at the top you find, so we have created, well, in the Agile world, we love manifestos, it seems. So we have created another manifesto that looks at sustainability. However, the thing that I really want to point out is that bit.ly link here with Agile-sustainability, because this is where the survey is. And you only saw an excerpt of the survey, so you had 12 statements. Is that about correct? Something like that. In total, there are 44. You two have seen other 12, or most of them were other 12 last year. And this has been published under Creative Commons, so feel free to make use of it, and maybe you can start a discussion on sustainable software development through using that survey. Then you find some ways how to find me. And well, maybe a last thing which I often forget is that I have also co-written a chapter in this book, which I also recommend, Software Sustainability. However, it is a academic book, and they used to be really expensive. I don't know why is that the case, but it is the case. So if you have an institution where you can access that, then I would recommend this. Okay, so thank you very much.